Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Melissa Garner and I'm the Director of Lindamood-Bell for Schools. Thanks for joining us today for our latest installment of our Leaders in Literacy webinar series. I'm super thrilled to introduce today's speakers. Deb McNally and Sheryl McCarthy both join us from Kentwood Public Schools in Kentwood, Michigan. Deb is the principal at Discovery Elementary and has a career in education for more than 30 years. She began her career as a counselor in a residential treatment facility before becoming a third grade teacher, and then ultimately became an administrator and has been a principal for 25 years. She and Sheryl work closely together at Discovery Elementary. Sheryl is the district literacy coach and has been in that position for almost 10 years. Sherry's career has been in education for more than 30 years. She started out as a resource specialist at multiple grade levels, as well as an SDC teacher at multiple grade levels. And we're just happy to have them here with us today. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about the district?
Sure thing. Kentwood Public Schools are actually the most diverse school district in the state of Michigan. We have 94 countries represented and 83 different languages spoken here. Some of our languages include Somali, Burmese, Swahili, Arabic, French, Spanish. And I think the contributing factor to a lot of our EL population is the wealth of churches in the area. We just tend to draw those kids. We have a little bit over 9,200 students and run at about a 61% free and reduced lunch rate. We have an early childhood center, 10 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and a high school and an alternative high school.
That's a lot of different languages, Sheryl.
That is, isn't it? Yeah.
And so, Deb, do you want to tell us a little bit about Discovery in particular?
I would love to. First of all, thank you for having us. We're excited about being on this opportunity as well. So Discovery has been in existence since 2006. We are the newest elementary in Kentwood. We are also, as of this year, the largest. We have 640 students this year. We are 59% free and reduced lunch, and of those students, 25% are EL. We also have had the honor from the Mackinac Center to be ranked in the top 100 schools for the last 3 years. And also, last year we were ranked 51st as schools that have continued to sustain their achievement over time. So we're proud of those things. I think one of the things that Kentwood is most proud of, though, is our diversity. If you ask anyone in Kentwood, what's Kentwood about and what are we proud of, we will say that diversity is our strength. And that's true across the board. It's a truly wonderful opportunity, and we all would not want to work anyplace else, because this is a great, like a microcosm of what the world should look like, in our opinion.
I know you're going to get into some detail about how you manage your RTI implementation, but I would love to hear just how you deal with the challenges that this diversity sort of presents. Because I mean, you said 25% of your student population there at Discovery is EL, is that right?
They are, and this year we have changed things a little bit. We have had an early childhood center, and we continue to do that. But based on the research, we have decided this year as a district to put our students in kindergarten and first grade into full immersion right as they come into the country. We agree with that because they are like little sponges when they're that young, and being surrounded by English is best for them. And I think that one of the reasons why is two-pronged. One, we've had a lot of sustained professional development in what to do with English language learners, how to work with them, and it works for all students. And secondly, as a result of that, and as a result of our strong vision about our diversity, you wouldn't be able to, you'd ask a teacher, okay, who are your EL students? And they probably have to pause and think, especially if they've been in the country for a while. And so we don't have this sense of, oh goodness, I can't have this child in my room because they're EL. They're in our classrooms and they're there most of the day. We have our EL teacher and she does do some pull out with them, but the majority of our kids are in the room for the majority of the day.
Wow, that's great. So it's fair to say then they're a very big part of your RTI implementation. They're just right along with all the other students. There's no, it's very inclusive, it sounds like.
And I know that sounds Pollyanna, but it's been over time. This is not something that's developed quickly. You know, I've been in the district, like you said, I've been a principal for 25 years, and when Kentwood started to get this population back when the first Bosnian Serbian war, and I think that was like in, oh gosh, it was in the late 90s, we did have that sense of, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with these students? They don't speak English. And so it's taken time and training for us to really pretty much be unfazed by it. Like, okay, we're going to bring them in. We're going to use what we know works. And these children are going to learn English, and how lucky that they're bilingual. And in some cases, trilingual.
Incredible. So I know you're going to tell us more about your RTI plans, but can you tell us kind of the big picture of RTI? I mean, you guys have been doing RTI for a long time. Even I always say that Kentwood's been doing RTI, Discovery in particular, before RTI was cool. So can you give us kind of the big picture, and then we'll get into some details about it, I think, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, we've been doing RTI here since 2006, and that's when I started. I opened the building, and it's changed. It's morphed over time. It's become ever more individual and focused on individual learning and individual needs. One of the things that we try and do is to be very intentional in our work with kids, but our intentionalness and our intensity is also with tenacity. And when I say tenacity, I mean it's kind of that whole notion of grit, that we are going to stick with kids. Sometimes we start out with a half an hour of intervention and then we move to an hour. And sometimes we move kids from kindergarten group to a first grade group if that's what they need. So it's really based on children's needs. We don't have preconceived notions when we go in. It's also something that we do throughout the district. Kentwood Discovery is not the only school that does RTI. All of our elementaries do. We have a very strong vision by our director of curriculum, Mike Pickard, and so we have had a lot of training as administrators on what to look for, a lot of training in reading, a lot of knowing what the building blocks of reading are. We've had Lindamood-Bell in our district for years. It's not something that we try on and then we try the next new thing. In Kentwood, we try and look at doing a number of things well and keep them sustained. And so that's our long-term vision for professional development, is that sustainability. We come back to it each and every year. We might add a layer. You might think, okay, we're going to shift a little bit of where we test our DIBELS students based on need, but it always comes back to what makes sense. Let's start first with the phoneme and the phonological awareness before we go into letters and sounds. You know, we're always looking at those basic building blocks, and it takes time. You know, it takes 3 to 5 years to really have your feet on the ground with something. And so I think that's something else Kentwood is good at, that we look at trying to be those workhorses. You know, we're not show ponies, we're workhorses.
Absolutely. And well, I guess this is a good time to talk about some of the particulars. So this is what people are going to want to hear. I think this is the ever elusive RTI chase, you know, trying to figure out how to make this work for your building. And what's really impressive is you have a lot of challenges there, diversity, lots of different languages, et cetera, but you still manage to make it all work. So I'm excited to hear some of the particulars here, if you're ready to talk about them.
Okay. My role here is new-ish in the last year. Kentwood has decided to take on Tier 1 Lindamood-Bell instruction in our word block, and we're doing Sing Stars for half an hour in Young Fives, kindergarten, first and second grade classrooms. So that is helping us take that whole RTI thing and tie it all together. So in order for us all to be on the same page, we meet once a month. We update on what is going on in the classrooms, the attendance of the groups, the behaviors, achievements. We celebrate student successes, talk about maybe should they move before we might have another data planning meeting. Our teachers are super good about saying, hey, this kiddo is ready to roll, let's go with it. And then we have professional development really at every building. The resource staff has been highly trained in Lindamood-Bell, and they are here on a daily basis to talk with the teachers, problem solve, help with whatever they need. And then we also talk about instructional refinement that we might see needing to happen around the building and address that.
Yeah, because you and you have another district instructional coach who helps with this, right? Where you're managing that refinement and
yeah, and it is a team for sure. It is. We're just some of the players, and the staff with the kiddos they're the ones who are on the ground.
I think what's been important is our focus on Tier 1. We try to focus very heavily on Tier 1 so that our Tier 2 is manageable. That's important. And the district has taken that notion of training our teachers well. We also have found Lindamood-Bell to be effective as well as other strategies, but it's one that in Discovery, 2 other buildings in the district have also said, we feel strongly enough about Lindamood-Bell that we want to extend it into our Tier 1 instruction. So my teachers are all trained in Lindamood-Bell. I have many of them trained both in seeing stars and in visualizing and verbalizing, because once you get that foundation, then you want to move into the comprehending and the looking at vocabulary. You're trying to hold that picture. What are you picturing? You hear that a lot in our school. And so when the teachers are aware of what's happening, not only in the small groups, but in Tier 1, it's a much more powerful combination. So I say that would be probably the biggest tip, is that have a strong Tier 1 basis so that you're not overwhelmed by Tier 2.
Yeah, I mean, I know you guys do some really cool stuff with Tier 1, and Sherry touched on it for sure. I'm curious. I mean, I know a lot about this because I've visited Kentwood and I've been to Discovery, but could you tell us a little bit more about some of the detail, like for example, some of the collaboration that you're doing at a pretty kind of micro level and what that looks like?
For our data dialogues would be one. We meet with grade levels every month to talk about what's happening in our Tier 1. And it's a 45-minute meeting. That time goes very quickly. And we rotate between reading and math. And at those meetings, they bring their data. We use iReady here in the district as a measure of our success and our growth. So we look at growth when we evaluate teachers. We look at proficiency when we're in data dialogue meetings, because if you keep your eye on proficiency, we feel in Kentwood that is what gets you to the best game for students. Because you can make a year's growth and still have a child academically still too far behind to catch up, especially if they continue to linger as they progress through the grades. So it's important, we feel in Kentwood, to keep that whole notion of where are they at with their achievement. So that's one thing we do. We look at our Tier 1 and we say, okay, what are we doing in Tier 1? How are we staying strong in that? Sometimes we do look at Tier 2 data because we want to make sure that we pull students during our Tier 1. So Tier 2 isn't just, I know it sounds really kind of weird, like we're using 1s and 2s all over the place, but we are pulling students during our Tier 1 instruction as well. We have an instructional model, and within that, we try and use 4 blocks of literacy during our day. So we have reading to self, we have a word block, we have a guided instruction block, and we have a writing block. And so during guided instruction, during the productive group work time, or during the time when you're reading to self, when you're conferring, those are perfect times to, based on your data, pull small groups of students, no more than 6, and work with them to reteach or to accelerate based on what your kids need. So that's a second layer. And now we haven't even gotten at the formal Tier 2. Exactly. That's next, and I'll have Sherry talk about that.
So formally Tier 2, then we meet 3-4 times a year. 4 times a year, and we gather all of the instructors along with grade level teachers, again looking at student achievement, and we place them in groups. The teachers then teach the lowest level of Tier 2 students, and they generally would use the seeing stars or visualizing, verbalizing, and but the coolest thing about it is that it's not just the struggling students that get the attention. During that blocked enrichment time, all of the students are getting something extra. So we may have a group of Tier 2 students studying a novel at the same grade level that we are having a group that's learning CVC words, working on letters and sounds. Just depends on where they are. And then every quarter, those we reconvene and go through the students and regroup.
And you might ask, okay, how do I do that with a whole grade level? I put all of my resources into a half an hour block. So with kindergarten, ours is push in, and we have what we call a power hour. And our teachers actually have worked with a trainer that comes into our district, and she's from Arizona, and she's done a lot of work with us about literacy, and her background is with EL, coming from Arizona. And she was here just this fall. So they're working on introducing literacy stations in our kindergarten rooms. And so the children are going between literacy stations while the teachers and then one other person is helping pull small groups. So that's happening within the classroom. That's their mode of intervention. In first and second grade, we pull the entire grade level in half an hour block, and I use my resource room teachers, I use all of my classroom teachers, I use any parapros or interventionists I have. So the more that you can use, and we use title funds for the majority of the funding, the smaller you can make your groups. And we will go from groups, we try to not make the lower groups any more than 6. Some of the groups wind up being only 3. We also have, during that same time, tier 3 groups where our special education teachers are doing hour-long Lindamood-Bell. Our schedule for the school is created in the summer, right before school starts. We have our special schedule, and then I have, either by phone or people stopping in, resource room knows the half an hour they're pulling for first, EL knows the half an hour they're pulling for first, teachers know it, there's no special during that time. So I create a school schedule that gives me a half an hour with my first grade where I can literally leverage everyone that I've got. And that makes the difference. So the scheduling is key. Then I do the same thing for second grade, where they are grouped all along the continuum, everybody in second grade. Now, when we get to those higher level groups, they're much larger. They can be 15 kids that are doing, they're creating a play or they're studying a novel. Sometimes we will put a first grade student in a second grade group because they're more advanced and they can go into a higher level. In third grade, my resources aren't as strong, so I scale back because that's in the afternoon. And then we have teachers doing the lowest group still, but we have bigger groups where they're doing more of, we're going to teach something in a guided reading format. So, you can do that. As a school, you can adjust where your resources are. Our focus is always on K2, trying to get our students so that they are prepared to exit second grade as solid readers and where we want them to be. Mobility, that's going to be the next question, so I'm going to pop in a principal's mind. Yes, we do have a fair amount of mobility, but here's my belief. Those children are going to be in a school somewhere. And so it is the right thing to do to try and get them and pull them at those younger levels. When I get to 4th and 5th grade, I'm expecting teachers to pull small groups in the classroom. If I have children move in or children that we still have that are woefully low, then I will figure out a way to work into 3rd grade groups or to have someone do a separate group with them.
What would you say, Deb? That's so super helpful. What would you say is a threshold? Because we get this question a lot. How do you, what's the threshold from tier 2 to tier 3? How are you making those decisions to then designate that student as a tier 3 student rather than a tier 2 student?
We're looking at Fontes and Pinnell and where we expect them to be at the end of the year. So, we have a district measure of a level D for kindergarten. I think it's a level F now for 1st grade. And then we'd like them to be at an RI level when they're in 2nd grade, having taken the RI and have a level that is, I can't remember the exact number, but it's pretty rigorous. It's not a really low number. So that's what we're looking at. If they're above that, they're doing well. If they're in a place where we can get them there in a year or so, they're going to be tier 2. If they're way behind that, then we're looking at a potential tier 3. And also if they're special education, they're going to be in tier 3. But we do have a number of our non-special education students in our Tier 3 groups. Our resource room teachers include those students. I also have my EL teacher trained in Lindamood-Bell, and as I said, I have my teachers trained in Lindamood-Bell. So I have a lot of resources there now as well.
That's great. The other thing I think is worth noting, and I think you've already said this, but I want to just underscore the point that when we're talking about leveling students here, I know that freaks a lot of people out. Really, though, it's all skills-based. You're looking at those data points in a very skills-oriented kind of way, right? I mean, it's a...
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's all about skills. It's all about what they need. We also, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we don't just use Lindamood-Bell. We use level literacy kits. We will have kids, working with and straight out of text. We have vocabulary kits that we use. And so the interventionists that we have that may vary from year to year are using the more prescriptive things, whereas my teachers are using that which requires more training and skill, and work with those smaller groups. And so in doing that, we can move kids pretty fluidly, even though we only meet 4 times and then a 5th time at the end of the year to see how we've done. We move kids in between those meetings all the time. We move them up, we move them down. We'll say, no, this one needs more time. We might move them into an hour-long group. And so the flexible part of that grouping is what makes it so different from what it was when I started in this profession, where, oh goodness, if you got into a group, you might stay in that group for a very long time.
For sure, for sure. And I know you, and I'm really excited that you have some results to share with us, right?
We do.
We do.
Yes, we do
indeed.
We're very excited as well, actually. For a long time, as you mentioned, Kentwood has been using Lindamood-Bell for intervention. It came into us as the resource room reading curriculum, and then we got so that we thought, oh, these gen ed kids should be included, and were. And then over time, we have our end of the year Lindamood-Bell results. But we were wondering how the skills that they were receiving were transferring to our district measure. As Deb mentioned, it's the RI, the reading inventory, and it's heavily vocabulary based in its measuring. So the graph that you're looking at is a result of a list that I sent over to our tech genius. And he took a master list of all of the students in Kentwood who've been in a Lindamood-Bell group. And so in the years 2013-14, you can see there they're split decoding and comprehension, so seeing stars, visualizing, verbalizing. The number of students is on the orange line. He took the average of their first RI test that year. That's the red line. And then he took their most recent average RI score, and that's the black line. So those students who started a group or were in a group in 2013-14 could still be in the 2014-15 clump of students, and so on. What we see overall there, obviously, is the amazing growth that the students are experiencing and the success that they're hanging on to it over the years. So we are super excited. The really cool thing for me was I asked our tech guy if he could send me the breakout list of the students we still had. I know we've seen more than this number of students over the years, but as we've mentioned earlier, we're fairly transient school system. And he sent me the list. So I was able to email last night some specific elementary teachers that I know work with kiddos who we were still working in 3rd grade to, this is a B. These are your letters, these are your sounds. And that student is now in 9th grade reading at a 987 or a super close to grade level. So I was able to send some of those emails out saying, thanks for sticking with it and sticking with those kids.
And I would like to mention too that when we're in the throes of doing this, it doesn't always feel like there's a marching band, at the end of the steps every night. We're looking at things and we look at our data and we're like, oh, come on. Just like everybody else out there. mean, last year with our kindergartners in particular, we were so demoralized at the growth that we were getting from them. And we put a lot of different things in place. I mean, our data was telling us we better get busy. And we started out doing vocabulary lists that were far more prescriptive to individual students. We started doing like a little certificate when they got a certain number correct, because we thought, okay, let's build in some reinforcers. And we got some growth. When they came back at the end of the summer, we lost some of that growth. And then we were like, okay, we had it. Let's try and get it back. So the ups and downs are there for us all the time as well. This is not something where we just see those lines go up and we're so excited all the time. We're struggling. You know, we're in the trenches every day trying to figure out what makes sense for a student. We also have students with behavior, and we have to back off and say, you know what, this student needs to have a relationship first, and then we'll work on our academics and make that more intentional. Another thing that I also want to mention is that data is important to us. So this year in particular, we added 120 children to our school. We put 4 classrooms on the back because Kentwood is a growing district. We added sections, and so in doing so, we had a lot of new students. So we wanted to look at, when we looked at what our data was this fall, how many of these students were low that were new to us, and how many of these students were low that we had over time? Because we need to see if it's low and new to us, that's one piece of information. If they're low and they've been with us for a long time, now that's an instructional problem that we have to address. And the results were mixed. It was a little bit of both, but primarily the lowest kids were the ones that were new to us. We felt like, okay, that's good. The ones that were with us and were struggling, we said, oh, we got to do something different. So I want everyone to know out there, this is accessible. This is doable. I don't have a ton of money. We have trained and we have stuck to our plan over time, and that's what works.
Absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that, Deb. I think that's a really great way to talk about differentiating based on actual student need versus, oh, they're a data point. These students are low. Why are they low? Where did they come from? How are we going to meet their needs moving forward? You guys have always been dynamos when it comes to that. So yeah, hats off.
Yeah, may I say too, because Deb, as an instructional leader in this building, this year Discovery has taken on a whole new thing with your trauma team. Mm-hmm. So because we have so many EL students and the places that they come from, some of our regular student population, we're learning a whole lot about what trauma does to the brain and how we remember and how we learn, how the students learn. And so Discovery, I feel like you guys are groundbreaking as far as having a team of teachers who are into that. And
well, we're trying to be. We're trying to do 2 things. Take care of ourselves as instructors, self-care, so that we don't burn out working with kids that have high needs and children that come from sometimes countries where there's been trauma or parts of their life that have been traumatic. And then also really realizing that if your limbic system takes over, it's difficult to learn. And what can we do to get children centered back so that their prefrontal cortex can be the boss. Absolutely.
So great. So I think, yeah, go ahead, Sherry, sorry.
I think that you also have done a series of charts of middle school specific information. I think that's what we're looking at now. This is the Seeing Stars, decoding students just from the one of our 3 middle schools that currently uses Lindamood-Bell, and our secondary curriculum person is looking at growth over time and the way that the kids are applying it to their reading skills and reading to learn in the middle school and high school. So there are a series of these charts, and there are 2. I think this is the decoding then for all students, and then the comprehension for all students. Some great growth. And what's exciting also is I was a little concerned. I thought that, oh man, those were going down, and why would that be? But those students could be students who they're only just 1 year into the program. So there is a sustainability of growth over time. So we're happy to see that.
Wouldn't it be fair to say also, Sherry, because when I was looking at some of the data that you sent over, I noticed the distinction between the number of hours per year, because that definitely factors into it too, doesn't it?
Absolutely does factor into it.
So the more access to intervention, it makes sense that,
Market growth.
yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have some more here, right?
Yeah, so Valleywood also has a newcomer center, and I think it's 25, I'm having a hard time, 25 students you see this past year, 17, 18, we're in our newcomers program. So think about coming to the United States with no language. You just show up in middle school one day, and all you know is Swahili. And those kids are making some phenomenal growth. And as Deb said, it's work, it's hard work. I worked with summer school with middle school this past year and had a group of kids who all spoke Swahili. And I always thought, oh, I kind of know what an EL student feels like because I've been to Mexico and I listened around to the language. Well, I've had 4 years of Spanish, so I could pick up a word or two. This summer, however, I think I got the real eye opener when I was in the group of 5 kids speaking Swahili to each other. I had no idea, and it gave me a huge insight into this is what life is like for them on a daily basis here. So the work that we're doing with these kids is most amazing. I think a gift they bring to Kentwood for sure is the high priority that they place on education. They're all over it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sherry. I've met some of your students, and I just am it's always a delight to meet them and work with them, but there's absolutely, that's true. It is a gift. Yeah, and I think you have some SPED results, is that right?
We do. We have some kids on IEPs showing also the more hours, the more growth we get.
And I would say these are all growth, and that's awesome. But as I said before, we also work on proficiency. Discovery is one of the buildings that decertifies children at a higher rate. And I think that's because our Lindamood-Bell instructors are incredibly tenacious. They are animated. They make sure that there is time on task. And when you start, you've got an hour of instruction, and it's fast moving. And as a result of that, and then also coordinating between gen ed and special ed and helping do some of those topics that they're doing in the classroom, we have decertified a number of students over their elementary years. So our proficiency, while not as strong as our growth, is coming along as well for our special ed population as well.
So when you say decertify, Deb, that makes me picture that they're exiting special education, yes?
That's exactly what they're doing.
No more
And
IEP.
we track them. At Kentwood, they tend to, we have a lot of students that stay in Kentwood. And so Katie Smith and Ainsley Smith are our 2 teachers. And Katie and I were just talking about, okay, what's this one doing? What's that one doing? And they're doing well. That foundation in elementary. And for us in special education, it's all Lindamood-Bell, because these are children that are struggling with those basic concepts. And between those 2 programs, it is amazing what it can do for kids.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this before. Deb and Sherry and I have talked about it a million times. It's the idea that considering more than 80% of kids on IEPs in the United States are there because of literacy, if you're controlling for that, you guys are a great example of a testament to that if you can control for those literacy skills, that's why you see kids exit, because that's the only thing that's keeping them in special services.
We do, and you know what? And I promise you, I'm not doing a plug for that company because I use many other strategies in the school.
That's right.
Lindamood-Bell gave us, it was an aha moment the first time that many of us were trained, and this was a good 15 years ago, where it was like, oh my goodness, we really can teach children those basic pieces and building blocks of the foundational skills of the language. And I know that on the other side of our state, Lindamood-Bell is basically a pay proposition. So that if you want to go to a private center where Lindamood-Bell is offered, you can do that. But the schools, by and large, the public schools have not embraced this on the other side of the state. Here in West Michigan, especially in Kentwood, It's part of our schools, and our parents are very fortunate for it because it is a great way for young kids or children struggling that are older to get those foundational skills, and then to learn how to be a person that creates stories with pictures in your mind, which helps hold that story and helps you with vocabulary, helps you to access it. It's phenomenal.
It's so great. Well, it's as good as the staff doing it too. You guys are a dynamite team there, for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Well, I think I do have a couple of questions for you. They're kind of common questions, and a few have been submitted that are kind of just the norm, the question we get all the time. So I'm glad to have you both on because you have a kind of a macro level of awareness on how to implement this, but also the micro. The question that always comes up inevitably is about scheduling. How do you structure a master schedule to accommodate everything you've just described here? Because that's the sort of the elusive thing.
I'm scooching up because I'm the perfect person to ask this question because I am not a great scheduler. I do not like making schedules. So you do not have to be an aficionado scheduler in order to make this work. You just need to find a couple of people in your building that are really good at it. I have a second grade teacher that helps me do this. I have someone in my office that helps me do this. I have a PE teacher that helps me with the specials. I know the big picture that I want. I know the outcome that I want to have, which is all of my blocks are protected. I make the decision that none of my lower elementary have specials in the morning. They have nothing but literacy all morning long. All of my 3 through 5 teachers have specials in the morning, and that comes from me. And over time, they have gotten used to it. At first, they did not like it.
It wasn't super exciting.
But now it's no big deal because you have to have those children at their prime time when they're learning how to read. So that's the primary thing. Then you bring those people together in stages. Those of us that are looking at, can we make this work by blocks? Then I bring in layers of people. I start out by bringing in my schedulers. Then I bring in my special people. When I'm done with that, then I have my people that look at special education and EL. Look at it. And finally, then my computer staff weigh in. And I have a whole day right before school starts where people are coming and going all day long so that I can create this schedule. I am not a person that goes off into the sunset like Einstein and comes out with, this wonderful schedule. I need lots of workhorses to help me build this. So it is doable. And when I don't have the same resources, I say, well, I can't do that this year because I don't have the title dollars, or I just lost this person and I can't hire another one. So I got to scale back on that. That group's got to be bigger, but we're going to keep our low group smaller. So it's not like every year I have a perfect schedule.
You're such a great resource, Deb. Thanks for that. That's really helpful. I think that about does it. That's the big one. And I wanted to give you plenty of time to answer the scheduling question because that's the one everyone has all the time.
And anyone can call me. We have a schedule that I would be happy to send you. You can call me or you can email me because it is the key to this whole thing and it is doable, I promise you.
I just put your email up on the screen so everyone can see that, and Sherry's is up there as well, and by all means, they mean it when they say it. Give them a call because this is way beyond just programming, and they're great resources for all the things you heard about today, not just our programs.
If you're close by, come and see us. We love to have people in the building as well.
They do. We've had lots of folks visit over the years, so yeah, it's a great place to visit too. It's just so dynamic.
And come see us as we are. We're not always dynamic, trust me.
I've never seen it otherwise, but I'll let it stand there for sure. Well, I can't thank you ladies enough for being a part of this. It's just always such a pleasure talking to you for sure, but this is going to be really helpful for a lot of other administrators out there, teachers who are watching. You can also, we're going to be featuring Sherry and Deb on our podcast on Lindamood-Bell Radio. So wherever you get your podcast, you can check them out there. And we'll check back on our website, and you'll find more details as when that's going to be posted. So thanks, ladies. It's always so fun to see you and talk to you.